I recently joined the world of people who wear glasses. They're super cute, except their box is enormous and it doesn't fit inside any of my pockets, which means I tend to carry them around less and wear them less. So today, we're making this cute little pouch that will fit in the pocket and keep your glasses secure. For today's pattern for our glasses case, we need our pattern, some fabric, and I'm just going to use some of this ruler which has already been pre-made that I had in my stash to use as my drawstring. So for your drawstring, you could use any kind of string or cord, even a shoelace. You know, just anything you've got is perfect to reuse. So as I'm preparing to cut, one thing I'm just taking note of on my very cute little cat fabric here is which direction the cats are facing. So ideally, I want most of my cats to be sitting in the upright position, but because this is a bi-directional print so that we can cut it either direction, some are going to be upside down. So if I look at it this way, the majority of the cats look upright. If I flip it over to the other selvage edge, there looks to be a few more prominent ones which are kind of upside down. So it's always one of those ways I tend to flip back and forth and kind of decide on which direction you want your fabric to go to have a look at. It's a good thing to get used to if you are like me and like using lots of patterned fabrics. So I've got my fabric and my pattern. I've decided which direction up I want my cats. I'm going to line up my pattern using my pattern weights to hold it in place, and I want to make sure that my grain line runs parallel to my selvage. It's just a good way to ensure that your entire piece sits nice and flat. Just going to pin in place. Because today's piece is relatively small, I'm just going to use a few pins. And I tend to use the weights just to hold everything nice and flat. I'm sewing with the windows open today because it is very hot, so it's a little windy. So the weights are also holding my pattern down from the wind as well. So you can see I'm all pinned in. I've got my scissors, slide my scissors in underneath, long, straight cuts, trying to use the full length of your blade. I have to move this one. I'm accidentally hitting the arm of my filming rig, so I just have to move it a little bit. Ideally, you want to move your fabric as least amount as possible while cutting, because it will help keep it straighter and flatter, which is great for later on when you're using fabrics which are more flexible. We're all cut out, so I'm just going to prop my pattern to one side. But you'll notice here on our pattern we have some little notches. So notches are either shown as little dashes, sometimes little triangles on pattern. So here it's telling me we have a 1 centimeter side seam and a 1 centimeter seam along the side. In the instructions you'll also see that you're going to fold it in half and pin along the edge. So what we're aiming to do is we're going to sew along here with our 1 centimeter seam allowance, then sew down here again with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Then we're going to finish off the edges before we finish the top. It's actually going to be pretty fast to sew, but it's a really fun project to make. We're at the machine. I've got it set up so it's just on a regular straight stitch. My needle is in the left hand position, so from my needle to the edge of my foot is a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I'm just going to take my pin out, get started. Do a reverse at the end just to make sure that seam is nice and strong, and come along. Okay, as I get to the end I'm just going to slow down, and then I'm pivoting, and then I'm going to come back up. I'm actually a little bit out from my seam allowance here. I'm just going to roll with it because it's a little bit easier than trying to bother with it. If this was for a garment where sizing is critical, then I wouldn't. For something like this, as long as I now maintain that my new seam allowance is where my edge of my fabric meets the clear plastic to the metal bit, as long as I keep it the same, it's going to work. And you know, if anything, it just gives my glasses a fraction more room to be slid in and out. So as I get to the top, I'm just going to make sure I do some reverses again at the top. And then remove it from the machine. I'm about to swap to a zigzag so that I can finish these edges along here, but I also know I want to reduce the bulk here and here so that when I turn the bag the right way round, it's going to have better corners. So I'm just going to clip and clip. So I'm just taking off the corner. So I've just taken away the corner pieces, so now you can see it's just a little bit of a triangle thing happening. And I'm going to swap the machine to a zigzag. And just because I can, I'm just going to line it up so I'm a little bit closer to that edge. Don't always reverse on a zigzag, but that was a good way to help me line it up. So as I get to the corner, I'm just pivoting and I'm just doing a few zigzags up the section I've just taken off. And mostly that's just for longevity, so that I know it's going to be able to be in my bag and just last really long time. So it's just kind of almost like a gentle curve. I'm going to zigzag up the edge and then we're good to go. So I just added some speed just to speed that section up. It's easier for me to speed the machine up than it is to edit the speed in. Okay, so we're all done. We're ready for the next step. So before I do anything else, I'm just going to quickly trim off all of my threads. Normally I tend to trim as I go, but it's just sometimes a little bit difficult to do that as I'm filming as well. So our inside's all done, we're finished our edges. So now we can turn it in the right way around. I just had to pause for a sec so I could go grab my trusty chopstick, which is the perfect tool for turning things inside out because it's nice and long and it's unlikely, or less likely at least, to poke a hole when you're turning in your corners. So that's looking pretty cute so far. What we're going to do is turn over the top edge and stitch it down a little, only like 5 mil, and then we're going to turn it down again and stitch again. When we do it the second time, if I can just poke it with me, we're going to stop either side and only sew from here around and stop here. We need this little gap here in the middle to actually allow us to put our drawstring in and out. So be sure to mark those two pieces to know that you stop about 1 centimetre out from either side. I've swapped my machine back to a straight stitch and I've popped just sort of 2 pins in It's a little bit tricky. So what we're trying to do is we're just going to fold over this edge by 5mm and stitch it down. So one of the easy ways to do it is to slide it in underneath your foot so that you've got your 5mm pressed down here, and you could use your iron to press it in place. But once you're in place, you use your presser foot like a hand and hold that in place while you maneuver and hold it through. We've got it all lined up. I'm just going to get started with a few stitches. Do a reverse. I'm just going in nice and slow, just keeping it nice and even. I'm going to take the pin out before I get to it because I don't want to poke myself in my hand. Whenever you have these fiddly sort of small bits to go around, just go slow. It's the easiest way to actually ensure you can go around without having any problems. So here I've just had it catch a little on the back of my presser foot, so I'm just going to ease the fabric past it. And you know, if I was going faster, well then that might have got caught. So I actually just turned off the camera while I stitched a little bit more. It seems we're underneath the flight path this afternoon, so I just had lots of planes and I'm not sure how much the noise turns up when I'm filming, so I just stopped. But here I'm coming back to my beginning spot, so I just want to make sure as you come back, you can just keep rolling it around. Back to the start, and once we're back to the start, we can just do our reverse, take it off to the side, trim. So we've got our top edge all nice and neat now. We're going to tuck it under again. This time we're tucking it under further. We're sort of aiming for 1.5 to 2 centimeters. So you can get through and you can measure this. Oops, if I bring my hands up a little bit more. So all I've done is just tuck it down on the inside using my fingers. So you can just measure this distance, figure out the distance down that you want. Once we've got that, we're going to pop some pins in, and I'll come back and start from that step. I've pinned my turn down in place. So I've got my turn down here, and I've pinned it in place, and I've pinned it upright to make it super easy to actually see it all. So I'm going to start my sewing on the inside, and I'm going to start, if I show you from the outside it might be easier, I'm going to start about 1 centimeter out from my seam allowance. I'm going to stitch all the way around and finish about 1 centimeter out again. To make this easier, you could mark it with 2 different coloured pins. You could use some chalk, anything which is going to remind you to stop and not sew between those 2 points. I fitted in underneath the foot and I'm about to lower the presser foot. It was actually a little bit of a wriggle to actually get it all happening in there because my presser foot didn't really want to go over the bulk of the seam allowance, so I just kind of had to wriggle it a little bit until it decided to cooperate. Get going, do my reverse, and then just ever so slowly go round and keep pulling around, making sure that it doesn't get stuck on the back of your presser foot at the back there. Sorry, mine just keeps catching on that little spring right there. This is your first time sort of working with something quite this fiddly. Don't despair, just go nice and slow, and there's, whenever you get too stuck, keep your needle in the machine, keep your presser foot down, work your fabric around until it's nice and flat. Just keep going. As long as where you're sewing is flat, it doesn't actually matter how wrinkled this bit is for this type of thing, so you're all okay there. Alright, I'm coming up to my end point, so I'm going to stop, do my reverses, take it out. When you take it out, always take it to the left hand side and leave nice long tails of thread. It stopped your machine from unthreading. Okay, so you can see I've got my gap here where I haven't sewn. I've just got to clean up my threads. So I'm going to clean up my threads and then we're going to come back and show you how to thread through your drawstring. We're ready to put our drawstring through our bag. One thing, just use a safety pin. It's by far the easiest, but choose one that's not too thick compared to the width of the casing you actually have to do your drawstring through. So I'm going to choose a smaller one as opposed to a larger one, because larger ones get stuck in the seam allowance and they make it really difficult to push it through. So try and build up a little stash of different sized ones. So I'm just going to go in through the actual rouleau to actually secure it so it doesn't accidentally come apart. So I'm opening it up from the inside and I'm pushing it up and then through into the casing. So this is why we've left that little gap. And once you're inside the casing, it's sometimes easier to push from the outside, and just push the safety pin around. I often find it's easier to push from the bottom of the safety pin because then you don't accidentally open it. Alright, I'm getting back to the beginning again. So now instead of trying to push it straight, I'm going to try and get it past that bump. I'm going to tilt it down. Of course, it never cooperates when I'm trying to do the demo, does it? So I just keep hitting the seam allowance. So yeah, I've got past it now. So I've got hold of it. I'm going to tilt it down, come back out the hole. Don't open your safety pin until you have your drawstring properly through, because you run the risk of it zooping back inside your actual casing. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of length. Cut. Undo. And then I'm going to hold the two ends together and then I'm going to pull until I get it to be even, and then I'm going to knot my ends together. Knotting the ends together not only makes a handy little way to carry your pouch, particularly once you've got your glasses in it, it also ensures that the two ends are not going to go back inside your glasses case once they're out and about in the world. I hope you enjoyed making today's project of our glasses case. Don't forget, every Friday there's new projects. Subscribe so you never miss one out.